Thank you very much. Credibility and oversight go together. This morning, there's some new information that has come out which reflects the importance of additional oversight, both from Mr. Richard and from the representatives of Caltrain. Now, you heard Mr. Richard say this morning that the reason they chose iOS North is, they have limited funds. They only have $20 billion. And $20 billion is less than what they estimated 3.5 years ago it would cost to go south, $31 billion. Now, that $31 billion is 3.5 years old. What would it be today? Would it mean that their gap is even greater? But what you weren't told this morning, and what came out 6 months ago, is that you have to add another $10 billion to the $10 billion gap between 20 and 31. That's because of a scandal that was uncovered by on the part of the High-Speed Rail Authority, by the Los Angeles Times and a whistleblower in October of last year. And it goes back to the fall of 2013, when the authority was concerned about the difficulty and the cost of going under and over the San Gabriel Mountains and the Tehachapi Mountains. So they went to their eminent contractor, one of the largest in the United States, Parsons Brinckerhoff, and asked them to study it. Well, Parsons Brinckerhoff did study it, and the High-Speed Rail Authority held on to the report and kept it secret for 25 months. Why did they keep it secret? Because their own contractor said, you have to add $9 billion more to your $31 billion, because the confluence of earthquake faults under those mountain ranges are the greatest in the world. The confluence of these faults, making it incredibly difficult to go through or under this region. They kept that secret. The whistleblower went to the LA Times. The LA Times wrote an article in October of 2015. What happened then? Congress descended on them. The Assembly, some of the people in the Assembly descended on them, and the court proceedings descended on them, until they were so embarrassed they finally revealed it days later after all this pressure was put, and it comes out, $9 billion. Now, where do you see that in the business plan? And where have you heard that today? Oversight and credibility are central to this issue. Now, I also want to commend to you to read a statute that you passed long ago. Public Utilities Code 185033. 185033. As I read this, it says, every time the authority gives a report to the legislature, and we've had the business plan of 2014, we have the business plan of 2016, and many other reports, including one today, they are supposed to tell you an updated cost of the entire statewide system and every segment of it, the entire statewide system. Now, is there anything that any legislature in the United States wants to know more? Updated cost of projects that they are funding. That's good oversight. It makes a lot of sense. They have never complied with that provision since Proposition 1A was passed. Are the people who live in San Diego, the Inland Empire, Sacramento, and Oakland potted plants? They did vote for this project. They're completely ignored. Nobody knows what Phase 2 is going to cost because they've never complied with that Public Utilities Code section. Make them comply. The voters of this state need to know what the entire statewide system is going to cost. They just pay attention to Phase 1, pretending like Phase 1 is everything. Now, I'd like to make a couple of comments about what Caltrain said. What they have not told you is that the original cost of electrification, when the legislature appropriated the money, was $1.2 billion. They haven't told you that that's almost doubled. Oh, no, it's almost doubled. Actually, the $600 million was appropriated by the legislature for the peninsula under the anticipation that the whole thing would cost 1.2. But if it's going to cost $2 billion, it means you've got to go back and appropriate more money, if that's even legal. Did you also know that when you appropriated $600 million for the peninsula and $500 million for Southern California, the bookends, did you know that they had not given you a funding plan? That is not a legal appropriation. There's no problem with the Central Valley. The Central Valley, they gave you a funding plan, the authority, and you appropriated the money. But the bookends were an afterthought, and they never presented you with a legal funding plan. You have to have a legal funding plan. That appropriation cannot be considered. It's not even legal because there was no legal funding plan as required by Proposition 1A. So that's very important to realize. You're also told these glowing stories about cooperation from Southern California. Do you know that your own legislative council said the Southern California operation is illegal under Proposition 1A because they won't electrify. They refuse to electrify. They can't get any Proposition 1A money. They can't even get the $500 million you supposedly appropriated for them. That is not revealed. Another instance where you need oversight. A few months ago, the High-Speed Rail hearing, the High-Speed Rail Authority held hearings on the peninsula about their grand plans for Caltrain. There was virtually an uprising, and here's why. There are 47 intersections between San Francisco and San Jose. They all have to be grade separated. That's about $5 billion conservatively. They don't have any money for that. They have no money. And listen to this. Proposition 1A requires that 12 trains going north and 12 trains going south be accommodated by the Transbay Terminal in San Francisco. That means that coming down the peninsula, there will be 12 trains going south, 12 trains going north. Every intersection and every city will be paralyzed without grade separation. They don't have the money for you don't hear this addressed. You don't hear it addressed at all. They don't have the money for it. It's going to result in paralysis. So these are a few instances why you desperately need oversight and why these unanswered questions need to be examined. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. I'm David Schoenbrunn. I'm wearing 3 hats today. I'm Vice President for Policy of the Train Riders Association of California. I'm the President of TransDef, a nonprofit that's currently litigating the eligibility of high-speed rail to receive cap-and-trade funding. We're seeking to have the court shut off the flow of cap-and-trade funds to high-speed rail. And I'm a member of the legal team that fought the lawsuits that were recently before the court in Sacramento. So I have 12 years of deep experience with high-speed rail. On the surface, the draft business plan is a nice, inspiring document. Under the surface, however, there are many problems with the claim that the authority can pull together nearly $21 billion to build the new IOS. First, even though the legislature appropriated bond funding for the bookends, that money cannot be spent on construction. No one seemed to notice that the legislature can't just give away bond funds. The promise of dollars given to Southern California was a bad check. There has to be a valid funding plan, not just one before the appropriation, but one after the appropriation that shows that the project is fully funded so as to be high-speed rail ready. They're $44 billion short on that. And so that means this great very generous gift to Southern California can't actually be used, and the same is true for Caltrain. I don't believe that, number 2, I don't believe they'll ever qualify for the release of bond funds for Central Valley construction. This plan is not a credible demonstration of the full funding of the IOS. Without full funding, no money for construction. I also have grave doubts about how many riders will be attracted to a 1-hour high-speed rail trip to then get on a bus to Los Angeles. And my colleague spoke about the unlikelihood of commuting at $63 a trip one way. They have to, they need special legislation to allow them to finance cap and trade. I think the legislature would be fiscally irresponsible to throw this project that kind of lifeline when it has no realistic way forward to the full phase one. 4, cap and trade revenues from 2025 to 2050 are very speculative. The high risk will produce much smaller proceeds than they need. 5, we are suing to prevent cap and trade from going to high-speed rail. We have evidence that the project will increase greenhouse gases rather than reduce them. A win in court would shut down the project by cutting off its funding. 6, it makes no sense to use the GHG reduction fund to build something that won't reduce GHGs for a long time to come. The urgent need for emissions reduction is now, when it really counts, and not in 20 years. 7, they're dreaming if they seriously think the feds will pony up more money. And 8, where does all the money come from for the rest of phase one? It certainly isn't from the monetizing of cash flows. This problem is the inevitable result of decisions that go all the way back to the early days of the authority. The new business plan talks a lot about bringing in the private sector early in the design process. That's also what the peer review group recommended, but that's not what was done. The private sector was not brought in for the most critical part of the design, selecting the route. The reason there is no private money in this project now is because the route is a money loser. No one from industry says that out loud because it would be impolitic. Without the enthusiastic involvement of private capital, there can't be a realistic plan to build an entire system. High-speed rail in California can be a viable money-making business. I'm a transit advocate. I'm a high-speed rail advocate. I'm profoundly opposed to this specific project. The thing is, this is not a money-making business when the route came out of political deal-making rather than designed by private transportation-oriented companies. Various rail operators are convinced that Los Angeles to San Francisco is a moneymaker if done right. I personally was present at the dress rehearsal of a presentation by a rail operator that was willing to build the entire Los Angeles to San Francisco system and had an investment banker ready to go. Their one condition was that they picked the route. They were turned down flat. The fact that you've never heard this discussed publicly says a lot about motivations. The authority has pretty much admitted in this draft plan that they have no way to build to Southern California. This plan is the early warning signal that Chairman Richards spoke about. It's time to hit the brakes because this project is heading for the cliff with a huge accompanying waste of taxpayer dollars. The Bay Bridge will appear tiny in comparison. Your responsibility to your constituents is to ensure that a high-speed rail system is delivered. They cannot assure you of that and don't even have a credible way of framing it at this time. Therefore, you should look to cut the funding, shut down the project, and ask the private sector to come forward with proposals on what they would like to build. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Grinley.
Thank you. Excuse me. My name is William Grinley. I come from Silicon Valley, and for full disclosure, I'm a 52-year card-carrying, bleeding heart, knee-jerk liberal. all right? But this project is badly conceived, badly managed, and will be a disaster. My colleague Bill Warren and I have spent the last 6 years, we've written 42 publicly available reports and a lot more that aren't, on why the finances don't work. This is my 10th time in front of the legislature, my 61st trip to Sacramento. I will take my 9th trip to Washington in a month. Our former senator from absent Richard Gordon's district, Joe Simidian, often said, Mr. Grinley, get to the point and state your thesis. So here's my thesis. The authority continues to ignore facts about ridership, fares, costs, and operating existing high-speed rail systems. It moves the goalpost on legal issues, lives in a fantasy land about private investment, uses illegal in the United States accounting to portray its train as profitable, and depends on political support from downstairs to continue. Before you are 6 observations in a paper of some 14 pages, plus one. The first documents that these guys aren't building a high-speed rail system. They're building a dirt mound because the terms shifted. They moved the goalpost. In 2014, after claiming there would be we'll build it and a concessionaire coming, they suddenly said, oh, the private sector is going to bring along investments in tracks, electrification, and signaling systems. Specifically now, in 2016, they say they want a design, build, finance, and maintain contracts. Catch the last two, finance and maintain contracts. Not as Mr. Morales said, design and build. Design, build, finance. But they want that up front before any ridership is proven. So that's a bit of a scam going on there for the initial. The second paper documents that the authority uses an accounting system that the European Union uses for its total rail systems. But that accounting system is not allowed in the United States. European Directive 91/440 said you separate the issue of who owns the fixed infrastructure from who owns and operates the rolling stock. Well, in Europe, that means the other government agency, because all the operators are government also, takes all the cost of maintaining the track's electrical system and signaling into a second pot. The third pot in most of the European countries are their health care systems. The fourth part are their pension systems. So they operate with 4 parts. Unfortunately for the authority, it all has to go into one pot here, and DOT requires such a thing. The third paper says to you that they have very carefully, with their wording over the last 3 plans, moved from recognizing AB 3034, Section 2704, subsection 8J's demand that they not need an operating subsidy, to putting that up as a lofty goal. So they're setting you up to take that fall. The fourth paper shows that the authority's computer modelers don't really know what is reality or what the authority surveys. They have never had a survey, particularly related to the present plan, that asks potential riders, what would you do riding a system which dropped you off in Bakersfield or dropped you off somewhere other than the downtown to downtown? They've never done that. So they make up their ridership numbers. The fifth paper addresses the issue that's already been addressed, which is a $63 one-way fare between Silicon Valley and San Jose. And the sixth paper in there, sorry. Thank you, David. The sixth paper asks a very interesting question. A week or so ago, I'm presently 122 pages into a critique of their plan. I asked myself, where is Oakland? Because the legislation says, and I can quote it for you if you don't want it, the high-speed system, rail train system to be constructed pursuant to this chapter shall be designed to achieve the following characteristics. Oakland to Los Angeles Union Station in 2 hours and 40 minutes. There is no mention of Oakland in the 2016 plan or the 2014 plan. So, let me get in closing. I once again ask you, please stop this Frankenstein. Nero downstairs may be looking for a legacy, right? But you can't kick the can down this road. You're going to take the rap while he fiddles. 3 senators, all of whom had been chairs of the Transportation Committee, voted against this project in 2012. Senator Simitian said this is the wrong project in the wrong place at the wrong time. Get brave. Don't let the puppeteer pull your strings anymore. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, and thank you all for your presentations. Mr. Patterson, any questions?
May I have one more minute? Mr. Richard talked about profitability in Acela. On the back of my handout, you will find this column chart, which we presented to Mr. Morales, Mr. Richard, and Mr. Rossi in November 2011. Yeah, you can be profitable. Acela is profitable. Acela charges 3 times per passenger mile what the High-Speed Rail Authority says it's going to charge. That's a pretty big difference. I can be very profitable if I'm Gucci and can charge 3 times the price of a good handbag.
All right, thank you. Mr. Patterson, questions? All right, great. Thank you very much for your presentations. We'll move on to the second panel and ask that those folks step forward. Thank you. We have Paul Kachaturian from Catch Environmental, Cesar Diaz, the State Building Trades, Keith Dunn from the California Association of High-Speed Trains, Paul Dyson of the Rail Passenger Association of California and Nevada, and Leanne Eager, Fresno County Economic Development Commission. Welcome to all of you. And just like with the last panel, choose your own order.
Well, it looks like I got the driver's pole position here. So Keith Dunn, Association of California High-Speed Trains. I will be extremely brief. We've had a lot of information presented today by both the authority as well as the opposition. I just want to really talk for a moment, and then I'm going to let Mr. Diaz, my colleague, talk a little bit more about the jobs. But this program has been going on for some time. In the Central Valley, we, Association for California High-Speed Trains, represents the contractors, design professionals, and others working to build and construct this project. It's creating opportunities in the Central Valley, which has been economically depressed. It's really doing a lot to move good quality, high-paying jobs for Californians, as well as delivering the environmental benefits that this program has promised. Moving towards the closer we get to construction and running trains, we're going to see more and more of those environmental benefits. It is a challenge. I think that we're all aware of that. What we can say is that it's making a real difference in the valley. If you haven't had a time, I know Mr. Patterson obviously lives there, has been able to see some of that construction taking place. We're excited to build it. We're looking forward to continue to work with this body and others in this legislature to make sure we're doing it right, because it is important that we get it right. But we feel like we're on a good path. We're looking forward to continuing in the construction process and providing good quality jobs for Californians and their families. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, member Cesar Diaz on behalf of the State Building and Construction Trades Council. As Mr. Dunn pointed out, we're also very excited about this project. A lot of our members are actually working for these contractors. The economic benefit to the Central Valley is already being felt. There's various newspaper reports about the build-out the downtown Fresno is planning, and the revitalization of their downtown. A lot of that's going to be vertical construction, and you're talking about access to the stations and actually moving people back and forth. As the conversations happen on affordable housing here in this legislature, transportation and efficient modes of actually moving people from one place to another is critical in that conversation, particularly because if you look at the Bay Area and the impact of the income inequality has there might be an opportunity to address housing there, but there's even a greater opportunity to move people from the areas that are high growth, that are perhaps more economically feasible for working families, and to be able to get them to those economic power centers, right? So if you talk about moving people from the Central Valley, where they can actually buy a home and live in actual good quality communities, and then have the ability to actually get on a train and get to work within half an hour. not only having the environmental benefit, but also being able to go back and forth and where their actual dollars can be stretched a little bit more. So we believe that's a critical piece of incorporating that. And with regards to the jobs, if you look at the plans that they have available now, they're talking about 20,000 jobs for the next 5 years and each year. And we're talking about areas that have seen unemployment levels to double digits, and they're still suffering from high levels of unemployment. The best ability to provide economic development for those areas, one of the best options is construction. Construction has a whole variety, not just in wages, but for contractors, and also the associated businesses and economic benefits that are associated with that, from the material suppliers all the way to the hotel chains and to the restaurants. We believe that this project has a lot of accountability, a lot of oversight. We disagree with the opponent's perception about this project. We believe the legislature has put in a lot of these controls, and we basically will continue to support the project as it moves forward because the state of California needs it. And thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. My name is Paul Dyson. I'm the president of the Rail Passengers Association of California, which is an all-volunteer 501c3 group supported by our members' dues. I've been in this country since 1980. Our group was actually formed in 1977, and we've consistently campaigned for a statewide passenger rail system using the appropriate technology, whether it's for intercity, regional, or local transit. And these systems should in turn be integrated with bus, ride-sharing, bicycles, and pedestrian access to provide convenient door-to-door journeys. As a point of information, I'm also a resident of the city of Burbank, which has been mentioned a number of times this morning. I have served and continue to serve as chair of that city's Transportation Commission for a number of years. RailPAC's always viewed the high-speed rail project as part of a statewide system serving multiple cities and an even greater number of origin and destination pairs. So while LA-San Francisco is important, it's certainly not the only reason to build a high-speed, grade-separated right-of-way for intercity and fast regional trains. Until Proposition 1A, California when it pursued anything at all, it pursued a policy of incremental upgrades to existing rail lines. And in those 35 years that I've been involved in that process, I'd say optimistically we've maybe made 10 years progress. For example, in spite of more frequent trains, rail journeys between Los Angeles and San Diego are no faster than they were in 1971. A number of key rail links like Palmdale to the San Fernando Valley, the Altamont line between Stockton and San Jose, the line from Bakersfield to Mojave, these are obsolete. They're obsolete for modern passenger rail service. The routes were laid down 100 years ago where avoiding cost was far more important than journey times. So while passenger services operate over some of these routes, they only are competitive because of highway congestion and heavy subsidy. And in fact, what's extraordinary is it shows how robust demand is for passenger rail, that people will still use these extremely slow services. So if we want to take passenger rail seriously, we have to have new rights-of-way, which will enable competitive journey times. And that sentence is the important one. If we are to take passenger rail seriously. We passed a proposition 8 years ago which seemed to indicate that we are taking it seriously. A lot of people seem to be backing off now. I think everybody wanted to be at the top of Mount Everest having their photo taken, but we're just leaving the first base camp and it's starting to get a bit arduous and some people are backing away. But I still think we need to get to the top of the mountain. Since 2008, progress has been slow and mistakes have been made, especially in the speed of property acquisition and in money spent studying high-speed routes into urban centers, which could never have been politically acceptable. So here we are in 2016 with a business plan that I believe is finally based in reality. Intercity trains will share rights-of-way and in some cases tracks with regional services into the city centers as they do in Europe. In the south, LA Union Station will eventually finally be modernized to enable efficient through working. The core route from Burbank to the south end of Orange County will be modernized and grade separated, an extremely important safety consideration for existing as well as future services. And in the north, San Francisco will have its electrification and its new station. Most importantly, the construction plans for the next 5 years are realistically based on the known funds available. Obviously, huge gaps remain. We had always envisioned envisioned actually that there would be a northern regional service and a southern regional service. That would happen first before the link was built between the two. And those northern and southern services would in fact stand alone and be of significant regional benefit, whether or not the final gap was bridged. The idea of a temporary terminus did not go down well in Burbank, and so the old business plan, which had a temporary terminus 10 miles short of the hub at Union Station, just didn't make any sense. We've seen a temporary terminus of the 710 freeway in Alhambra for over 50 years, and we didn't want to get into that game. Thank you very much. We do need to find money to bridge those final gaps between up to Merced and into Bakersfield, and that shouldn't be too difficult. So obviously the real challenge is the mountain crossing. I believe it is likely to be accomplished as a toll railroad with predominantly private capital. It won't be easy, it won't be inexpensive, but experience around the globe indicates that it can be done and that it should be done. These upgrades in Southern California, as an example, again, high-speed rail improvement is all about linking multiple stations. I travel from Burbank down to Orange County, and that train ride will be 30 minutes shorter with the upgrades that are proposed in this business plan. What is the alternative? You know, we've just spent over $1 billion on upgrading the 405 freeway through the Sepulveda Pass, and the metro engineers tell us that it hasn't improved journey times through there at all. We're spending another $1 billion putting in carpool lanes through Burbank, and we're enduring years of construction and closed bridges while those carpool lanes are installed. Will they improve anything? Are we looking forward to wonderful fluidity in our traffic down there? Of course we're not. The additional lanes will just fill up with traffic. So we can choose. We can have an electric railroad for fast intercity and regional passenger rail linked to transit and local buses, or we can keep adding freeway lanes and building more airports. Come on down to Burbank and talk about building more airports or expanding the runways down there. You'll be extremely popular. That's the choice. That's the choice, Mr. Chairman, and so it seems to me, yes, warts and all, and there are plenty of warts on this project. Nobody said it was going to be easy or clean, but I personally believe, and I think the majority of Californians still believe, that this is something with which we should continue. Thank you very much for your time.